Nammo Didafa. Good morning. Thank you for joining me for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The fourth mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I vow to cultivate loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and to relieve others of their suffering. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am determined to speak truthfully with words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. I will not spread news I do not know to be certain, and will not criticize or condemn things of which I am not sure. I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, or that can cause the family or the community to break. I am determined to make all efforts to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. We've been reading for our Dharma readings a book by the nuns of Amaravati called The Body, Dhamma Reflections on Aging, Illness, and Death. And we're in the Dhamma talk by Ajahn Candasiri called Meeting Death and Sadness. And this picks up just after she's related the story of the Buddha before his enlightenment, when he accepted rice milk from Sujata. This was the most important event in his life, and a very important time for all of us too, because if he hadn't come to that understanding and subsequently agreed to share his understanding with others, his teachings would not be available for us today. Shortly after his enlightenment, he considered whether it would be beneficial to share his understanding with others, whether anybody would be able to appreciate it, or be at all interested in practicing what he taught. It seems that he had serious doubts about this, thinking, maybe it's better just to leave it. But it's said that then the Brahma god Sahampati appeared before him, and with palms joined in reverence, requested a favor. Beings are here, with but a little dust in their eyes. Pray teach the Dhamma out of compassion for them. There are people who will understand, and who are suffering for want of hearing this teaching. He begged the newly enlightened Buddha to share this teaching out of compassion. So the Buddha considered who he might teach, and the first people he thought of were his two former teachers. This would be a way of repaying them for the teaching he had received from them. But he learned that they had both recently died. He then decided to share his understanding with 5 ascetics who had formerly been his companions, but had left him after having heard that he had eaten some milk rice. They felt he had given up on the struggle to reach the deathless, and so they decided among themselves that they would offer him some water and a place to sit, but would not show him any kind of reverence. However, as he approached them, something about his presence was so impressive that in spite of their agreement, they found themselves attending to him in a most appropriately respectful way, offering him the best seat and taking care of his robes and bowl. But they still weren't really ready to listen to what he had to say. He had to say to them 3 times, "Friends, the deathless has been found. Listen carefully." Each time their response was, "Even practicing all those austerities, you didn't achieve the goal. How, having given up on your austerities, could you possibly have attained to that state?" Each time he said, "Listen, the deathless has been attained. Listen to what I have to say." Finally, he said, "Have you heard me say this before?" They admitted that they hadn't, so he said again, "Listen," and at last they agreed to listen to what he had to say. First of all, He pointed out that there's a middle way, a path between the extremes of austerity and indulgence and sense pleasures, which leads to insight, to understanding. This is the path to be developed, to be followed. Then he enumerated what we now know as the Four Noble Truths. The first is that life as human beings is difficult. The Pali word dukkha literally means hard to bear. There is suffering. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Sickness is suffering. Death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Association with the disliked is suffering. Separation from the loved is suffering. Not getting what you want is suffering. We can all relate to these things. As human beings, we all experience that life is difficult. He pointed out that the 5 focuses of identity, body, feeling, perception, formations, and sense consciousness, are suffering too. This is interesting. This body and mind are things we habitually identify with. However, if we cling to them, they too inevitably will cause us suffering, because at some stage they will change and die. And before they die, we can expect to experience significant amounts of discomfort, either physical pain, feeling too cold, too hot, hungry, thirsty, tired, or mental. All these things are unpleasant states, and even unpleasant states are unsatisfactory, are dukkha, because of course they too will change. They can never provide us with any lasting peace and satisfaction. It's interesting that after the Buddha had enumerated the 4 Noble Truths, one of the ascetics who were listening to him fully understood what it was that he was pointing to. I always enjoyed the description of his understanding of what he came to appreciate as a result of hearing this teaching. I like it because while the sutta which relates these events is quite long, enumerating in detail each of the 4 Noble Truths, the understanding that the Venerable Kandanya reached is just one sentence. Everything that has the nature to arise has the nature to cease. That was it. All that arises ceases. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for joining me this morning.